The scent of that unfamiliar perfume, the dismissive lies, the almost invisible scratch, these tiny details began to form a terrifying mosaic in Tessa's mind. It hadn't always been this way. Tessa remembered the day Maxwell Harrington had swept her off her feet, a whirlwind romance that felt like a fairy tale. He was everything she, an orphan who had drifted through the impersonal chill of foster care, had ever dreamed of. Charming, attentive, powerful. His smile could light up a room, his laughter a melody that promised forever. Their early life together was a sun-drenched landscape of idyllic moments. Stolen weekends in Paris, quiet evenings by the fire in their sprawling penthouse, his arm always around her, a shield against the world. She had loved him with an open, trusting heart, believing she had finally found her safe harbor, her family. Remember that feeling? The one where you think you've finally found it? Yeah, Tessa was swimming in it. But what family was Maxwell truly modeling? His own was a fractured, gilded cage. His father, Gregory Harrington, a name whispered with a mixture of awe and disdain in certain circles, was a notorious philanderer. Gregory's countless, carelessly conducted affairs hadn't just broken his marriage, they had shattered it, leaving shards that had pierced young Maxwell's soul. The constant tension, the public whispers, his mother's slow, heartbreaking decline into an early grave. These were the old wounds that festered deep within Maxwell. Think about it. How does a kid grow up normal seeing that? From that bitter wellspring grew a deep-seated paranoia, a conviction that betrayal was not a possibility, but an inevitability in any intimate relationship. He'd vowed never to be the fool his father had been, yet ironically, this vow twisted him into something just as damaging. It's crazy how trying to avoid one monster sometimes turns you into another, right? The first signs were subtle, easily dismissed. A sharp question if Tessa stayed out a little too late with her college friends. "Who were you really with, Tessa?" spoken with a lightness that didn't match the steel in his eyes. A possessive glint in his eye when she mentioned a male colleague who'd praised her work. He'd always disguised it as care, as concern for her safety. "The world is a dangerous place, my love," he'd murmur, his hand gently stroking her hair, a gesture that once felt comforting now carried a faint chill. "I just want to protect you." And Tessa, who had known so little protection in her life, who cherished the very idea of a stable, loving family above all else, wanted to believe him, needed to. So she dismissed the tightening knot in her stomach, the faint tremor of unease. This was love, wasn't it? Intense, all-consuming love? Or was it the beginning of an emotional prison? What would you have done? Drop a comment below if you've ever ignored a red flag you shouldn't have. Then came James Carter. James, a kind, steady presence from her foster care days, a brother more than anything else, a safe space. They reconnected at a small alumni event for the scholarship program that had given Tessa her start at Harrington University, a program ironically funded by Maxwell's family. Their conversation was easy, filled with shared memories and laughter. Innocent. Absolutely innocent. But Maxwell, observing from across the room like a hawk, saw something else entirely. His jaw tightened. Later that week, the first veiled comment slipped out during dinner, amidst the clinking of crystal and silver. "James Carter, you said? Seems quite fond of you." He'd laughed it off, a light, airy sound that didn't quite reach his eyes, a chilling dissonance. "Just an old friend, Max," Tessa had replied, a little bewildered, a small frown creasing her brow. But the comments continued, little barbs disguised as jokes, each one a tiny puncture in the fabric of her security. "Sure he doesn't want to rekindle an old flame? You orphans stick together, don't you?" The cruelty of that particular dig, referencing her most vulnerable point, was breathtaking. And then, chillingly, after she announced her pregnancy, a moment that should have been pure joy, he'd said, "We should get a state-of-the-art nursery, only the best for the Harrington heir." The unspoken question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Paternity. The word itself was a vile insinuation, and it unsettled Tessa to her core. How could he even think such a thing? This wasn't just jealousy. This was something darker, more corrosive. Into this brewing storm of marital discord stepped Victoria Hayes. Picture this. She was a new, ambitious associate at Harrington Media, one of Maxwell's many ventures. Sleek, sharp, with eyes that missed nothing and a smile that could cut glass, Victoria was a woman who knew what she wanted, and more importantly, how to get it. Their first confidential meetings were ostensibly about a struggling TV channel Maxwell owned, a forgotten asset he was considering reviving. He'd found himself talking, really talking, for the first time in months, spilling his frustrations, his burgeoning and entirely baseless fears about Tessa. And Victoria? Victoria was a gifted listener. She wouldn't just nod. She'd lean in, her expression one of profound empathy, her voice a low, soothing murmur. She'd validate his every twisted thought. Tessa's newfound friendships, her sudden need for independence. Victoria never directly criticized Tessa. Oh no, she was far too clever for that. She was a master of emotional manipulation. Instead, she'd offer subtle affirmations of his fears, like poison dripped slowly into his ear. "It must be so difficult, Maxwell," she'd coo, her hand lightly touching his arm, "when you've given someone everything, to feel unsure." Or, with a sigh of feigned understanding, "Men in your position are always targets, aren't they? It's a terrible burden to bear, wondering who truly values you for you." She artfully fanned the flames of his paranoia, positioning herself as the one person, the only person, who truly understood his complex genius and his profound suffering. Classic. Maxwell felt a flicker of guilt sometimes, those old wounds throbbing. Late at night, watching Tessa sleep, her serene face framed by her dark hair, her hand resting protectively on her gently swelling belly. This was Tessa, his wife, the woman he had once, or so he'd believed, loved beyond measure. The mother of his child. But the consuming paranoia, the ghost of his father's betrayals, the insidious whispers from Victoria, these were a stronger, more insidious force. And Victoria was a dangerous, intoxicating balm to his wounded ego. She made him feel powerful, understood, desired, at a time when his own insecurities were eating him alive. The affair began, as these things often do, not with a dramatic explosion, but a series of quiet capitulations. A clandestine dinner at an out-of-the-way restaurant, its discreet entrance promising anonymity, ostensibly to finalize the channel strategy. Laughter that was a little too loud, a glance that lingered a fraction too long over the rim of a wineglass. His hand brushing hers as he reached for the wine, a spark igniting. Then a hotel room, anonymous and opulent, the kind that catered to secrets. Victoria was everything Tessa was not, worldly, cynical, unencumbered by naive notions of fidelity or the messy emotions of a burgeoning family. She was a mirror reflecting his darkest suspicions, validating them, making them seem almost reasonable. While Maxwell found a perverse solace in Victoria's cool, calculating arms, Tessa was at home, her world shrinking, her anxiety a constant, gnawing companion. His late nights became more frequent, his explanations curt and vague, offered with an edge of irritation. Work stress, he'd snap if she questioned him, his emotional distance a chasm growing wider by the day. She felt an unbearable isolation. The glittering city lights outside their penthouse windows mocking her loneliness. Each distant twinkle a reminder of a life that felt increasingly out of reach. How many of you have felt that kind of loneliness, even when surrounded by luxury? It's a special kind of hell. If you know, you know. Hit that like button if you've ever felt trapped by circumstance. One rainy afternoon, the city a blur of gray outside the vast windows, Tessa found herself searching for a misplaced file relating to one of her charities in Maxwell's home office. A room she rarely entered anymore, as he'd grown increasingly prickly about his privacy, claiming he couldn't be disturbed. Her hand, trembling slightly, brushed against a small, crisp receipt tucked into a leather-bound blotter on his antique desk. It was from an exclusive jeweler on Fifth Avenue, a name synonymous with eye-watering price tags, a place whose name she only knew from glossy magazines. The itemized purchase? The Serafina necklace, diamond and sapphire. The date was from 2 weeks prior. Her heart gave a strange, painful lurch. It wasn't her birthday, not their anniversary. She'd received no such gift. Could it be a surprise for after the baby? A peace offering for his recent moods? But the secretive nature of it, coupled with his recent coldness, his veiled accusations, felt wrong. Deeply wrong. A chilling premonition, cold and sharp as an icicle, snaked through her. What was he hiding? Who was Serafina? The name Serafina echoed in her mind, unfamiliar, yet somehow ominous, like a whispered warning. She tucked the receipt into the pocket of her maternity dress, the smooth paper feeling cold against her skin, a tangible piece of an unknown puzzle. Alone in their opulent penthouse, a gilded cage of her own, Tessa clutched the strange receipt, a cold dread settling in her heart, a dread that whispered of infidelity and deeper betrayals. That evening, Maxwell returned late, the collar of his expensive shirt slightly rumpled, his scent faintly of an unfamiliar, cloyingly sweet perfume she didn't recognize. Definitely not hers, and not one he'd ever worn before. He brushed off her concerned questions about his day with a chilling indifference. "Just business, darling," he lied, the words hanging heavy in the air, a hollow echo in the vast, silent room. As he turned away, Tessa noticed a faint, angry red scratch on his neck just below his ear, partially hidden by his collar, a mark he quickly, almost instinctively, tried to cover when he saw her looking. Her blood ran cold. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture she didn't want to see. And the worst part? This was just the beginning. If you think this is bad, wait until you hear what he does next. Seriously, subscribe now so you don't miss the fallout. You won't believe it. The name Victoria Hayes echoed in Tessa's mind, no longer just a colleague of Maxwell's, but a potential key to the nightmare her life had become. The Harrington Foundation's annual charity gala, an event Tessa had poured her heart and soul into organizing for months, was supposed to be a night of triumph, a luminous showcase of her philanthropic work, especially the new scholarship program for orphans, a cause so deeply personal. Instead, it became the glittering, opulent stage for her public humiliation, a brutal, unforgettable spectacle. Can you even imagine? Planning an event to celebrate hope, only for it to become your personal horror show? The Harrington estate was a vision, transformed into an enchanted forest under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights. Crystal shimmered, champagne flowed, and the air hummed with the conversations of Boston's elite, a symphony of wealth and influence. Tessa, visibly pregnant in a gown of sapphire blue that matched her eyes, moved through the crowd with a practiced grace, a warm smile fixed on her lips. But beneath the surface, a gnawing anxiety twisted her insides. Maxwell's behavior had become increasingly erratic, his mood swinging wildly from possessive affection to icy disdain. Tonight, he was particularly on edge. Why, though? What could possibly be bothering a man who had everything? James Carter, her dear friend, her rock from the tumultuous years in foster care, attended to support Tessa's cause, his presence a small comfort in the overwhelming grandeur. He'd made a generous donation, quiet and unassuming, unlike some of the more ostentatious pledges. When Maxwell finally arrived, fashionably late, his handsome face was a thundercloud. His eyes, usually so full of command, were dark and restless. He scanned the room, his gaze briefly flicking over Tessa before settling, with unnerving intensity, on her animated conversation with James near the silent auction tables. They were laughing, sharing a light-hearted story about a mishap from their youth. Innocent. But in Maxwell's poisoned mind, already inflamed by Victoria's earlier, artful insinuations, Tessa seems so spirited around her old friends, doesn't she? It's almost like a different person emerges. The scene was damning. Proof. The brief interaction between the two men was a study in controlled frost. Maxwell approached, his smile a tight, insincere curve. "Carter," he acknowledged, his voice clipped, extending a hand. The handshake was brief, Maxwell's grip like steel. James, ever polite, attempted to engage him, praising Tessa's passionate dedication to the foundation. "She's done a remarkable job, Mr. Harrington. Truly inspiring." Maxwell's response was a curt nod, his eyes already dismissing James, sweeping the room as if searching for a threat, or perhaps an escape. Within minutes, he'd excused himself, leaving James standing there, a bewildered frown creasing his brow. Tessa, busy with other donors, missed the exchange, but a prickle of unease ran down her spine. Something was very wrong. Later, as the jazz quartet played a soulful melody under a sprawling oak tree, Tessa sought out Maxwell. She found him alone by the meticulously manicured rose garden, the fragrant blooms a stark contrast to the stormy expression on his face. She approached, her heart buoyed by the evening's success so far, the donation pledges exceeding all expectations. "Maxwell, is something wrong?" she asked gently, her hand instinctively going to her stomach where their baby fluttered. He turned, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. It was cold, contemptuous. "Wrong," he sneered, his voice low and venomous. "I see you had a wonderful time with your old friend James," laughing, touching his arm, practically draped all over him. Don't think I didn't see it from across the lawn." Tessa stared, stunned into silence for a moment. The accusation was so outlandish, so far from the truth, it was like being slapped. "Maxwell, I was hosting. I greet everyone that way. James is a friend. You know that. He came to support the foundation." "Don't lie to me," he cut her off, stepping closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. "I've seen your texts, Tessa, the secretive little messages. You two go way back, don't you? Maybe you never really let go of him. Maybe that's why you got pregnant so conveniently, to trap me." Her jaw dropped. Each word was a physical blow. The air seemed to rush from her lungs. Are you insinuating this baby isn't yours?" she whispered, tears burning in her eyes, the unspeakable accusation hanging like a toxic cloud in the fragrant night air. This was beyond jealousy. This was a deliberate, cruel attempt to shatter her. He shrugged, a gesture of exaggerated, chilling calm. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Or perhaps you'd like to offer another explanation." Anger, hot and fierce, finally flared beneath her profound hurt. "How dare you?" Her voice trembled but gained strength. "How dare you? I have been nothing but faithful to you, absolutely devoted. This baby, our baby, is a symbol of my love for you." Maxwell scoffed, his handsome features twisted into an ugly mask of irrational fury. "So you say, but I know how old flames can rekindle, Tessa. I've seen it happen in my own family, remember? My father wasn't exactly a paragon of virtue. The gaslighting was astounding, using his own father's betrayals as a weapon against her." Tears spilled over, hot and shameful, tracing paths down her cheeks. "I am not your father's mistress, Maxwell. I am your wife, and this child," she placed a protective hand over her belly. "This child is ours. I cannot believe you would think otherwise, that you would say such vile things to me." A few guests, strolling along the garden path, glimpsed the tense confrontation, their curious glances quickly averting, whispers already starting to ripple through the high society event. The public humiliation had begun. The hush of the rose garden, moments before a sanctuary of beauty, now seemed to amplify Tessa's ragged breaths, her choked sobs. She wanted to scream at him, to rail against his injustice, but her voice was strangled by heartbreak. Maxwell remained cold, an unsettling swirl of distrust and something akin to triumph in his eyes. He had her where he wanted her, exposed, vulnerable, accused. He turned away, his parting shot delivered with calculated cruelty. "If there's nothing to hide, Tessa, you won't mind a paternity test after the baby's born, will you? Just to clear the air." Then he stalked off, leaving Tessa trembling among the perfect, indifferent roses, her world collapsing around her. She wanted to chase after him, to demand an apology, to shake him until the loving man she married re-emerged. But humiliation, stark and brutal, rooted her feet to the spot. For the remainder of the event, Tessa wore a mask of composure, a queen presiding over her court, even as her kingdom crumbled. But inside, she was shattered. She found herself retreating early, murmuring excuses about fatigue, ignoring the questioning glances of her friends and the knowing smirks of society rivals. Victoria Hayes, Tessa noticed with a sickening lurch in her stomach, was also present, positioned discreetly near a group of influential board members. As Tessa passed, Victoria's eyes met hers, and for a fleeting second, Tessa saw it, a subtle, almost imperceptible smile of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a mask of polite concern, but Tessa had seen it. And in that moment, a new, terrible suspicion began to form, a suspicion about just how deep Victoria's influence over Maxwell ran and what her true motives might be. Was Victoria merely a confidante, or the architect of this entire nightmare? Tessa fled the rose garden, the thorns of Maxwell's words tearing at her heart. That night, as she sobbed alone in their cold, cavernous bedroom, a new resolve began to harden within her. He had drawn the battle lines, and she realized with a chilling certainty that this was no longer just about their marriage. It was about her survival and the protection of her child. She had to find out what or who had turned her husband into this monster. Her eyes fell on a discarded invitation to the gala lying on her dressing table, and there, listed on the host committee, was the name Victoria Hayes. It seemed to stare back at her, a silent challenge. What would you do if you were in Tessa's shoes? Would you crumble or would you fight? Let me know your thoughts, because what Tessa does next will shock you. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single detail of this insane story. Trust me, the drama is only just getting started. The name Victoria Hayes echoed in Tessa's mind. No longer just a colleague of Maxwell's, but a potential key to the nightmare her life had become. Maxwell thought he had broken her that night in the rose garden, shattered her spirit with his vile accusations, but he underestimated the primal fury of a mother lioness fighting for her cub, and underestimated Tessa's quiet, steely resilience forged in the fires of a difficult childhood. You ever been underestimated like that? It's a powerful motivator, isn't it? Though heartbroken, devastated by the betrayal of the man she loved, Tessa wasn't about to let him or anyone else destroy her and her unborn child. The first person she called, her voice thick with unshed tears but firm with a dawning resolve, was Rachel Townend. Rachel, her steadfast friend from college, was there within the hour, her expression a mixture of fury at Maxwell and fierce protectiveness for Tessa. "That absolute bastard," Rachel seethed, pacing the opulent living room that now felt like a gilded cage. "Tess, you cannot let him get away with this. We need to fight." And Rachel knew just who to call. Within a day, she'd brought in Sarah Duvall, a renowned, no-nonsense family law attorney with a reputation for being a shark in the courtroom and a compassionate advocate for her clients. Sarah was exactly what Tessa needed: sharp, strategic, and utterly unfazed by the Harrington billions. Their initial legal consultation was a sobering experience. Sarah, her gaze direct and assessing, listened intently as Tessa recounted the escalating nightmare: Maxwell's paranoia, his cruel accusations, the chilling mention of a paternity test. "His potential public accusations are incredibly serious, Tessa," Sarah stated bluntly, her voice devoid of false comfort. "In a high-profile case like this, mud sticks. We can't just deny. We need concrete counter-evidence. We need to show his bad faith. What skeletons does Maxwell have in his closet?" Tessa's mind raced. She recalled the hushed whispers she'd dismissed over the years, rumors about Maxwell's own discretions, always quickly silenced, stories of NDAs and hush money. And then there was the increasingly prominent, almost symbiotic presence of Victoria Hayes in his life. The late nights that stretched into early mornings, the hushed, urgent phone calls Maxwell would take in another room, the exclusive business trips Victoria always seemed to be on. There's Victoria Hayes," Tessa said slowly, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. "She's an executive at Harrington Media. They've been spending a lot of time together. He says it's work, but—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Victoria Hayes, we start there. But investigations cost money, serious money, especially when going up against a man with Maxwell's resources." Tessa, despite the Harrington name, had little access to liquid funds. Maxwell controlled the purse strings with an iron fist. This is where another unexpected ally stepped in. Morgan Madsen, Tessa's foster father figure, a kind, hard-working man of modest means who had been a beacon of stability in her turbulent youth. When Tessa, swallowing her pride, confided in him, Morgan didn't hesitate. He wasn't a multimillionaire, not by a long shot, but he had a small nest egg, savings he'd painstakingly put aside for Tessa's wedding, money she'd never used, insisting their lavish wedding was more than enough. "This is for your future, Tessa girl," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, pressing an envelope into her hand. "For you and the little one. You fight that man. You show him what you're made of." His quiet financial and moral support was the lifeline Tessa desperately needed. It's amazing how the people with the least often give the most, isn't it? True generosity isn't about amount, it's about sacrifice. Hit like if you agree. With Morgan's backing, Sarah Duvall assembled a discreet team of private investigators, former federal agents, forensic accountants, people who knew how to dig in the dark and unearth buried secrets. Their initial focus: Maxwell Harrington and Victoria Hayes. The investigators began to track their movements, their communications. It was painstaking, frustrating work. Maxwell was careful, experienced in covering his tracks, a legacy of his father's own clandestine life. There were near misses, tantalizing leads that turned into dead ends, whispers from disgruntled Harrington Media employees about Victoria's meteoric rise and her unusually close relationship with the boss, but nothing concrete. They uncovered a pattern. Victoria frequently accompanying Maxwell on business trips to cities like Chicago and Los Angeles, where Harrington Media had affiliate stations. Official logs listed her presence as senior media consultant or executive assistant on special assignment. Flight manifests showed them on the same planes. Hotel records often showed them in adjoined suites, sometimes even the same sprawling penthouse suite, booked under corporate accounts. Suspicious? Absolutely. Provable affair? Not quite. The frustration was immense. Days turned into weeks. Tessa felt the walls closing in, the weight of Maxwell's impending legal assault a suffocating pressure. "Are we sure we're on the right track, Sarah?" she'd ask, her voice thin with anxiety. Sarah, ever calm, would reassure her. "Patience, Tessa. Men like Maxwell always make mistakes. They get arrogant." And then, the first real break. A leaked email chain, obtained from a disgruntled IT technician at Harrington Media who had his own axe to grind with Victoria Hayes after she'd callously and unfairly, he claimed, had him demoted. The emails were between Maxwell's official Harrington Media account and an anonymous, encrypted email ID that the investigators quickly traced back to Victoria's private address. The messages started formally, all business jargon and strategy PowerPoints. But as the investigators scrolled through weeks, then months of correspondence, the tone shifted. The professionalism frayed, replaced by an increasing, undeniable flirtatiousness. "Can't wait for our next strategy session in Chicago," one of Maxwell's emails read. Victoria's reply, "Me neither. You always have such stimulating ideas." Another from Maxwell, "You looked absolutely stunning at the dinner last night, Victoria. Had a hard time keeping my eyes on the quarterly reports." And then, the kicker. A reference that made Tessa's blood run cold. "Still thinking about that night in Suite 1203. Unforgettable." Tessa's reaction to reading these emails was visceral. She felt a wave of nausea, the words blurring before her eyes. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was cold, hard proof of an emotional and almost certainly physical betrayal. The disgust was quickly followed by a hardening resolve, an icy fury that burned away her remaining tears. He was accusing her, while he was the one living a lie? Oh, this changed everything. What would you feel in that moment? Pure rage? A cold desire for revenge? Let me know in the comments. The investigative team, energized by this breakthrough, immediately focused on Suite 1203. They traced the reference to a 5-star luxury hotel in Los Angeles, a frequent haunt of Maxwell's. The date of the email corresponded with one of his urgent business trips 3 months prior. Getting access to hotel records or surveillance footage that old was a long shot. Hotels had strict privacy policies, and data was often overwritten. But Sarah Duvall was relentless. Her investigators worked their contacts, pulling strings, calling in old favors. And then another stroke of luck, or perhaps a touch of karma. They found a recently departed hotel security manager, a man who'd been unceremoniously fired after a minor infraction and was more than happy to quietly share some parting gifts. He provided old surveillance logs that confirmed Maxwell and Victoria Hayes had both been registered guests during the week in question, their stays overlapping, and then the smoking gun. The real bombshell. The ex-employee, with a smirk, handed over a USB drive containing a crucial, grainy snippet of CCTV footage from the private elevator lobby of the penthouse floor. There it was, in blurry black and white but unmistakably them. Maxwell Harrington and Victoria Hayes, stepping out of the elevator late at night. Victoria leaned into him, her hand on his chest. Maxwell's head dipped down. And then they kissed. Not a friendly peck, but a deep, passionate, lingering kiss, the kind that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Afterwards, they walked arm in arm towards the door of the penthouse suite, Suite 1203. When Tessa first saw this video in the sterile conference room of Sarah Duvall's office, she felt physically ill. The room seemed to tilt. All those nights she had spent alone, pregnant, worried sick about Maxwell's moods, his distance, his veiled accusations. While he was doing this, waves of betrayal so profound they stole her breath, overwhelmed her. But then, through the pain, a steely resolve emerged, stronger than ever. She would not let Maxwell's lies prevail. She would not be his victim. This video, this sickening visual proof of his deceit, was also the weapon she desperately needed. And as if the universe was finally aligning in her favor, Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place later that day. While numbly scrolling through social media, trying to distract herself, Tessa stumbled upon a recently posted photo on a popular gossip blog's Instagram. It was Victoria Hayes, snapped at some industry event. And there, glittering against the silk of her dress, was a stunning diamond and sapphire necklace. A necklace Tessa recognized instantly. The Serafina necklace. The date of the photo? Just a few days after the date on that mysterious jeweler's receipt she'd found in Maxwell's desk. The final, damning link. He hadn't just cheated, he'd flaunted his affair, buying his mistress lavish gifts with the money that should have been securing their family's future. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated campaign of deceit and emotional abuse. And Tessa now had the proof. All of it. Sarah Duvall watched the damning video with a grim satisfaction. This is it, Tessa. This is the ammunition we need. This is more than just infidelity. This is hypocrisy of the highest order. As Tessa held the small USB drive containing the footage, her hand trembled, not with fear this time, but with the righteous weight of the hidden truth she was about to unleash. Maxwell's official summons, demanding her appearance in court to answer his outrageous claims, arrived the very next day, delivered by a stern-faced process server. The documents were cold, formal, and filled with legal jargon designed to intimidate, dragging her into the public arena he clearly intended to be her slaughterhouse. But he had no idea what was coming. The cold, formal summons was a declaration of war. But Tessa clutched her own weapon, ready to turn Maxwell's carefully constructed battlefield into his own public execution. You know that feeling when the underdog is finally about to get their moment? That's where we are. Get ready. The courtroom buzzed like a disturbed hornet's nest, a cauldron of hushed whispers, flashing cameras, and palpable tension. This wasn't just a preliminary hearing. This was the high society scandal of the decade, and everyone who was anyone, along with a voracious media pack, was crammed into the ornate, wood-paneled room. Maxwell Harrington, billionaire tycoon, sat confidently at the plaintiff's table, flanked by his phalanx of high-priced, stone-faced lawyers. He looked every inch the wronged husband, his expression a carefully curated mask of sorrow and righteous indignation, ready to watch his heavily pregnant wife be systematically dismantled, her reputation shredded before the world. He had absolutely no idea she was about to detonate a bomb under his perfectly crafted, gilded life. Oh, the delicious irony. Have you ever seen someone so smug, so sure of themselves, right before their world implodes? It's a sight to behold, isn't it? Tessa, dressed in a simple, modest black maternity dress that emphasized her vulnerability, yet somehow also her quiet strength, sat ramrod straight beside Sarah Duvall. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her face was a study in composure. She avoided the hungry stares of the gallery, the relentless click-click-click of the cameras. Instead, she focused on a point just beyond the judge's stern visage, drawing strength from an inner reservoir she hadn't known she possessed. This was it. The culmination of months of fear, betrayal, and a desperate fight for the truth. Maxwell's lead counsel, a silver-haired legal gladiator named Marcus Thorne, renowned for his ruthless cross-examinations and theatrical courtroom style, kicked off the proceedings. His voice boomed across the courtroom, painting Tessa as a calculating opportunist, a gold digger who had seduced her way into the Harrington fortune, and then, with brazen audacity, betrayed her generous husband. He paraded their evidence with a flourish. The artfully misleading photographs of Tessa and James Carter in the cafe, their tearful, innocent conversation, twisted into something sordid and secretive. Selectively edited text messages, stripped of all context, were presented as proof of an illicit affair. Thorne even had the audacity to suggest that Tessa's philanthropic work was merely a cover, a way to meet other men. Disgusting, right? To twist something good into something ugly? Maxwell, throughout this character assassination, looked appropriately aggrieved, occasionally shaking his head as if in profound sorrow, even dabbing at a non-existent tear. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and Tessa could feel the tide of public opinion in the courtroom turning against her. The murmurs growing more hostile. She risked a glance at Maxwell. He met her gaze, his eyes cold, unforgiving, a chilling emptiness where love had once resided. There was no remorse, only a smug certainty of his impending victory. Then, it was Sarah Duvall's turn. She rose, a figure of calm, collected confidence in the swirling emotional vortex of the courtroom. Her voice, though softer than Thorne's, cut through the tension with precision and clarity. "Your Honor," she began, "Miss Tessa Harrington vigorously denies these spurious, baseless, and frankly, offensive allegations. My client is eager to prove her child's legitimate parentage once the child is born. However, what we are here to address today is not just Mr. Harrington's unfounded suspicions, but his profound and demonstrable bad faith in bringing this action. We have compelling evidence that Mr. Harrington himself is the one who has broken his marital vows, seeking to defame his wife and destroy her reputation while concealing his own significant misconduct." A hush fell over the courtroom. You could hear a pin drop. Maxwell's smug expression faltered, just for a second, a flicker of something in his eyes. Annoyance? Or was it fear? Sarah methodically, and with devastating effectiveness, shred Maxwell's flimsy case. She pointed out the benign nature of Tessa's meeting with James Carter, introducing the full, unedited text message exchanges that clearly showed they were discussing Tessa's philanthropic projects, specifically the new foster care initiative, not some torrid romance. Even if my client sought emotional support from a lifelong friend during a time of profound marital distress caused by her husband's increasingly erratic and cruel behavior, Sarah stated coolly, her gaze unwavering, that does not equate to an affair. It equates to being human. Thorne objected, of course. Irrelevant. Speculation. But the judge, a seasoned jurist named Carol Hastings, known for her sharp intellect and intolerance for courtroom theatrics, merely raised an eyebrow and waved him down. "Proceed, Miss Duvall." The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch when Sarah announced, her voice ringing with conviction, "Your Honor, we have additional evidence. Evidence that Mr. Harrington has engaged in conduct far more damning, far more indicative of betrayal than any out-of-context photo of a handhold in a public cafe." She gestured to a large monitor that had been discreetly set up behind the counsel's table. "We would like to introduce Exhibit D, a video, Your Honor, obtained from the security cameras of a luxury hotel in Los Angeles, dated 3 months ago." At once, Maxwell's attorneys were on their feet, a chorus of objections erupting. Objection. Irrelevant. Invasion of privacy. Improperly obtained evidence. This is an outrage, a desperate attempt to smear my client. Thorne thundered, his face flushed. But Judge Hastings, her expression now one of intense intrigue, silenced them with a sharp rap of her gavel. "Mr. Thorne, I will be the judge of its relevance. Your objections are noted. Ms. Duvall, you may proceed." What do you think was going through Maxwell's head right then? Panic? Pure, unadulterated panic? In a room thick with anticipation, the lights dimmed slightly and the video played. It was grainy, the timestamp in the corner clearly visible, but the figures were unmistakable. Maxwell Harrington and a striking, raven-haired woman, a woman many in the courtroom, especially those from the Harrington media contingent, recognized as Victoria Hayes, stepping out of a private hotel elevator. They paused, stepped closer, and then they kissed. Not a casual greeting, not a friendly peck. It was a passionate, lingering, deeply intimate kiss, the kind that spoke volumes, the kind that left absolutely no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Before the stunned courtroom could fully process it, the video showed them walking arm in arm, disappearing into a penthouse suite together. A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, echoed through the courtroom. Whispers erupted, spreading like wildfire. All eyes turned to Maxwell. His jaw was clenched so tight a muscle pulsed erratically. His carefully constructed composure had shattered, his face draining of all color, turning a ghastly chalky white. He looked like he'd been poleaxed. His lawyers, Thorne included, were visibly scrambling, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning horror. This was not in their game plan. Tessa kept her eyes closed for a moment, taking a shaky breath, the roar in her ears deafening. When she opened them, Sarah Duvall was hammering the point home, her voice resonating with cold fury. Mr. Harrington, who stands before this court accusing his pregnant wife of infidelity, is clearly the one engaging in an extramarital liaison. The hypocrisy is staggering, Your Honor. Sarah didn't stop there. She presented the corroborating evidence with methodical precision. The internal hotel logs verifying Maxwell's booking of that very penthouse suite for the dates in question under a vaguely named corporate entity. She read aloud one of the more damningly flirtatious emails from Maxwell to Victoria, the one referencing that night in Suite 1203. The air crackled. This was a courtroom showdown for the ages. The accuser had just become the accused, in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. Judge Hastings eyed Maxwell sternly, her disappointment palpable. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice devoid of sympathy, "you filed these very serious and damaging claims against your wife, seeking to tarnish her reputation and question the paternity of your unborn child. Yet it appears you have conveniently withheld highly relevant information about your own personal conduct. This significantly undermines your credibility before this court." A subdued, almost shocked hush reigned. Maxwell, pinned under the judge's icy scrutiny, visibly struggled to maintain any semblance of composure. He looked smaller, somehow diminished, the arrogant billionaire momentarily stripped bare. Tessa sat still, tears finally sliding down her cheeks. Tears of profound relief, yes, but also tears of deep, aching hurt for what her marriage had become, for the love she thought they had shared. She had dreaded this confrontation, this public airing of their dirtiest laundry. But in this moment of his exposure, she found an odd, unexpected sense of liberation. Her name, her honor, would not be so easily smeared. When the preliminary hearing finally ended, after what felt like an eternity, Judge Hastings delivered her ruling. A temporary dismissal of all of Maxwell's claims against Tessa, pending further review and a formal paternity test after the child's birth, which Sarah Duvall stated Tessa would willingly agree to. Crucially, she issued a stern reprimand to Maxwell and his legal team for any future attempts to harass or intimidate Tessa, cautioning that the court would not tolerate frivolous or vindictive litigation. It was a clear victory. For now. Tessa, exhausted but triumphant, every ounce of her being thrumming with adrenaline and a strange, hollow ache, left the courtroom with Sarah Duvall by her side. She ignored the frenzied press, the shouted questions, the blinding flashes of cameras. A part of her soul still mourned the beautiful dream that had been her marriage, the love that had promised such fierce protection and had instead delivered such devastating betrayal. But for now, she had won a critical battle. She had unveiled the hidden truth in the most public way possible, and the tables had well and truly turned. Emerging from the courthouse into a maelstrom of flashing cameras, Tessa Harrington was no longer the accused, but the accuser who had spoken her truth. Maxwell, by contrast, was hounded, his empire of lies crumbling around him. The battle was won, but Tessa knew the war for her future, and her child's, was far from over. That night, the first pangs of labor began, far sooner than expected. The courtroom victory felt distant as a sharper, more urgent reality seized Tessa. Her child was coming, amidst the ruins of her marriage and her husband's public disgrace. Her daughter's first cry, a raw, surprisingly powerful sound in the sterile white delivery room, cut through the lingering bitterness of betrayal, a pure note in a world that had become deafeningly complex and ugly. Evelyn Rose Harrington. A new dawn, a fragile new life, born from the ashes of a love story gone spectacularly wrong. Can you even imagine the whirlwind of emotions? Vindication, exhaustion, terror, and this overwhelming fierce love all at once? It's a lot. The stress of the preceding months, the public humiliation, the agonizing uncertainty, it had all taken its toll. Tessa's labor was premature, intense, and fraught with moments where her strength nearly gave out. Rachel Townend, her rock, was by her side, a fierce guardian at the gate, but there was another, unexpected presence. Maxwell. Humbled, shamed, his usual arrogance stripped away to reveal a raw, almost boyish vulnerability Tessa hadn't seen since their earliest days. He appeared at the hospital, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and something akin to fear. He looked broken. He'd heard about the labor through a frantic call from Rachel to his lawyer, a call made more out of legal obligation than any desire for his presence. Tessa's first instinct was a surge of pure, unadulterated anger. How dared he show his face here, after everything? But then she saw him, really saw him, standing hesitantly in the doorway, his expensive suit rumpled, his usually immaculate hair disheveled, and in his eyes beneath the shame was a flicker of genuine remorse, a desperate plea. She was torn. Every fiber of her being wanted to scream at him, to banish him. But this was also Evelyn's father. Legally, he had rights. And a tiny, treacherous part of her, the part that still remembered the man she had loved, saw a glimmer of the Maxwell she thought she knew. "You can stay," she whispered, her voice hoarse, the words costing her more than he would ever know. "But there are rules. No stress, no fights. This is about her, not us." He nodded, his throat working, unable to speak for a moment. "I promise, Tessa. Whatever you want." And, to her astonishment, he kept that promise. Throughout the grueling hours of labor, Maxwell was uncharacteristically gentle, a quiet, supportive presence. He fetched ice chips, mopped her brow with cool cloths, murmured words of encouragement when she faltered, his voice uncharacteristically soft. He didn't try to control the situation, didn't offer unsolicited advice, didn't once mention the nightmare they had just endured. He was just there. When Evelyn Rose finally arrived, a tiny, perfect miracle with a surprisingly lusty cry, Maxwell's composure shattered. Tears streamed down his face, unabashed and raw, as he stared at his daughter with an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. Dr. Catherine Lund, Tessa's obstetrician, gently placed the swaddled newborn in Tessa's arms. In that instant, all the betrayal, the fear, the heartbreak receded, replaced by an overwhelming, unconditional love for this fragile little being. She was here. She was safe. "Evelyn," Tessa whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Evelyn Rose Harrington." Maxwell repeated the name, his voice breaking. "Evelyn." Tessa, watching him, saw not the ruthless tycoon or the cruel accuser, but simply a father, undone by the miracle of his child. It was a confusing, emotionally charged moment. What do you make of Maxwell's sudden change? Was it genuine remorse, or just the emotion of the moment? It's hard to tell with guys like him, isn't it? In the days and weeks that followed, the media narrative shifted dramatically. Headlines that had once screamed "golden wife" or "golden lie" now blared "Harrington's pregnant wife vindicated" and "Tycoon's affair exposed in courtroom bombshell." Maxwell was painted as the villain, the hypocrite, the architect of his own downfall. His carefully cultivated public image was in tatters. Harrington Global's stock prices dipped, investors grew nervous, and board members grumbled privately about the damage to the Harrington brand. The man who once commanded rooms now found himself a pariah. And Victoria Hayes? Oh, her downfall was swift and brutal. Ostracized by the society she had so desperately tried to conquer, she was quietly, unceremoniously let go from Harrington Media, the official reason cited as restructuring and budget cuts. She attempted a carefully orchestrated interview on a C-list gossip show, trying to paint herself as a misunderstood woman who had simply fallen in love. But few believed her spin, especially after the damning hotel video. Rumors circulated that she was trying to pen a tell-all book, a desperate last grasp for relevance, but no reputable publisher would touch it. One evening, weeks after Evelyn's birth, while Tessa was nursing the baby, she overheard a voicemail on the main penthouse line, a line she rarely checked. It was Victoria, her voice no longer cool and calculating, but shrill, pathetic, almost begging Maxwell to call her back, to explain things. Tessa deleted it without a second thought. Victoria Hayes was yesterday's news. Good riddance, right? Some people just dig their own graves. While still physically recovering from the difficult childbirth, Tessa, with Sarah Duvall's counsel, initiated legal separation. There was no going back. The trust was irrevocably broken. She sought sole primary custody of Evelyn, along with substantial child and spousal support. The final court hearing before Judge Carol Hastings was mercifully brief, devoid of the previous drama. Maxwell, looking weary and truly contrite this time, didn't contest Tessa's primary custody. His lawyer simply stated that Mr. Harrington's sole concern was for the well-being of his daughter, and that he wished to establish a fair and consistent visitation schedule. A compromise was reached. Tessa would have primary legal and physical custody. Maxwell would have structured, initially supervised visitation. He would also pay significant child support and spousal support, a tacit acknowledgement of the emotional and reputational damage he had inflicted. The early days of parenthood were a blur of exhaustion, overwhelming love, and a fragile, uneasy peace. Tessa poured all her energy into Evelyn, her small apartment, a safe haven away from the opulent penthouse she now associated with so much pain, filled with the soft sounds of a newborn. Maxwell, under the strict terms of the court order, began his cautious, almost timid attempts to be a father. He arrived for his supervised visits punctually, often laden with extravagant gifts, oversized teddy bears, designer baby clothes, which Tessa politely accepted and then quietly donated most of. He offered to help with feedings, with diaper changes, his large hands surprisingly gentle with his tiny daughter. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he actually listened when Tessa spoke about Evelyn's routines, her needs. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer unsolicited advice, didn't try to take control. He just listened. Tessa observed him with Evelyn, her heart a confused tangle of emotions. She saw a flicker of the man she had once loved, the man she had believed him to be, in the way his eyes softened when he looked at their daughter, in the genuine awe in his voice as he marveled at Evelyn's tiny fingers, her perfect little yawns. Could this be real? Could fatherhood truly change a man like Maxwell Harrington? Or was this just another carefully crafted performance? It's a tough call. People can change, but deep-seated patterns are hard to break. What do you think? Can a narcissist truly find redemption? Tessa, meanwhile, began her own journey of healing. She threw herself back into her philanthropic work, finding a renewed sense of purpose. The experience had scarred her, yes, but it had also made her stronger, more resilient. She launched a new initiative through the Harrington Foundation, now with her firmly at the helm of its charitable decisions, to support young women aging out of the foster care system, providing them with mentorship, education, and resources. Her story, now public knowledge, resonated deeply, and she became an unlikely but powerful advocate. 1 year later, they gathered for Evelyn's first birthday. It wasn't a lavish Harrington-style affair, but a small, intimate gathering in Tessa's sunny apartment, filled with balloons, soft toys, and the scent of a homemade cake. Rachel was there, of course, and James Carter, who had remained a steadfast, supportive friend throughout the ordeal. And Maxwell? He was present, quieter, more subdued than Tessa had ever known him. The interactions between them were civil, almost warm at times, but still careful, underscored by an unspoken awareness of the chasm that still lay between them. They were co-parenting. The passionate, all-consuming love that had once defined their relationship was gone, replaced by something far more complex, a fragile truce, a tentative respect forged in the crucible of shared parenthood. For Evelyn's sake, the romantic love was a ghost, but perhaps, just perhaps, a different kind of connection. A partnership in raising their daughter was slowly, painstakingly beginning to form. At Evelyn's first birthday party, as Maxwell awkwardly helped Tessa clear away wrapping paper from a mountain of presents, their hands brushed. A brief, charged silence. "Thank you for today, Tessa," Maxwell said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. She's incredible." Tessa merely nodded, a small, unreadable smile playing on her lips. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential landmines, but for the first time in a very long time, it didn't feel entirely consumed by darkness. Evelyn's happy, gurgling laughter filled the space between them, a bright, hopeful sound, a fragile bridge built of pure, untainted innocence. Evelyn's laughter, a melody of hope, became the new soundtrack to their fractured yet evolving story. Some fires, you see, burn so fiercely they consume everything in their path, leaving only ashes, bitterness, and the ghosts of what might have been. But sometimes, just sometimes, from those very ashes something wholly unexpected, something resilient and surprisingly beautiful, can begin to grow. Life's funny that way, isn't it? Just when you think it's all over, a new chapter starts, one you never saw coming. 2 years. 2 whole years had spun by since the explosive courtroom drama that had ripped the Harrington marriage apart and laid bare its rotten foundations for the entire world to dissect. Evelyn Rose Harrington was no longer a fragile newborn, but a bubbly, inquisitive toddler, a whirlwind of chubby legs, infectious giggles, and a stubborn streak that Tessa wryly admitted probably came from both sides of the family. She was the undisputed, radiant center of Tessa's universe, the anchor that had kept her from drifting away entirely during the darkest storms. What about you? Is there someone in your life who's been that anchor for you? Let me know in the comments. These stories of human connection are what keep us all going. Tessa herself had undergone a profound transformation. The shy, somewhat naive girl who had been dazzled by Maxwell's worldly charm was gone, replaced by a woman of quiet strength and unshakable resolve. She had channeled her pain, her experiences, into her philanthropic work with a new, fierce passion. The Harrington Foundation, under her astute guidance, now had a laser focus on supporting single mothers escaping abusive situations and providing comprehensive aid to children from broken homes, children like she once was. She wasn't just lending her name to a cause. She was on the front lines. Her own story of resilience and survival, a powerful testament that offered genuine hope to others. She became a respected figure, not just in Boston's high society, which she now navigated with a weary but knowing grace, but in wider advocacy circles. The media, once so quick to paint her as either a gold digger or a victim, now hailed her as a symbol of empowerment. Funny how a little truth can change the whole narrative. And Maxwell? Well, Maxwell was a work in progress. The public disgrace, the hit to his business empire, and most significantly, the undeniable, unconditional love he felt for Evelyn, had chipped away at his arrogant, domineering facade. He had consistently, and to Tessa's initial surprise, been a devoted father. His court-ordered visitations had transitioned from supervised and awkward to more relaxed and regular. The domineering traits hadn't vanished entirely. Could they ever, truly? But they were significantly softened by a hard-won humility and a genuine, desperate desire to be a good father to Evelyn. He attended every parent-teacher meeting at Evelyn's preschool, every Daddy and Me music class, looking slightly out of place in his bespoke suits amongst the more casually dressed fathers, but always, always present. He listened, really listened, when Tessa discussed Evelyn's milestones, her funny little quirks, her occasional tantrums. He didn't try to control or dictate. He learned. It was a slow, arduous process of redemption, one driven not by a desire to win Tessa back. He seemed to understand finally that ship had sailed, but by a profound, life-altering love for his daughter. Their interactions, once fraught with tension and unspoken accusations, settled into a polite, sometimes even friendly, rhythm. They were focused entirely on Evelyn's well-being. School events, doctor visits, discussions about preschools, they navigated these with a carefully constructed civility. They were not reconciled romantically. The trust, once so comprehensively shattered, couldn't simply be glued back together. Too much damage had been done, too many cruel words spoken, but they had found a way to redefine family. To be a family for Evelyn, even if they were no longer a couple. One crisp autumn afternoon, about 18 months after the final custody hearing, they found themselves sitting side by side, albeit with a careful few inches of space between them, on a small wooden bench watching Evelyn attempt to conquer the big kid slide at a local park. Evelyn, fearless and determined, kept tumbling onto the soft wood chips at the bottom, then scrambling back up, her face a mask of concentration. After a particularly wobbly descent, Maxwell let out a soft chuckle. Tessa glanced at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "She gets that stubbornness from you, you know?" Tessa said, her tone light, almost teasing. Maxwell looked at her, a hint of the old sadness in his eyes, but it was tempered with something new, acceptance perhaps. Probably, he admitted quietly, or maybe from her mother. He paused then, uncharacteristically, opened up. "You know, Tessa, my father, he wasn't just a philanderer. He was a master manipulator. He played my mother and me against each other. After their divorce, he'd tell me things about her, things that weren't true, to make me doubt her, to make me reliant only on him. He'd twist everything. For years I thought that was what love, what marriage was. Control, suspicion. Always looking for the betrayal before it found you." It wasn't an excuse, Tessa knew, but it was an explanation, a glimpse into the twisted roots of his paranoia. It didn't absolve him, not by a long shot, but it added a layer of tragic understanding to the man he had become, and the man he was now, slowly trying to unbecome. It was a small, almost imperceptible crack in the wall he'd built around himself, a moment of vulnerability she hadn't expected. This was one of those quiet breakthroughs, a subtle resolution to one of the burning questions that had haunted Tessa. Why? Why had he been so quick to believe the worst of her? The ghost of Gregory Harrington still loomed, but perhaps, just perhaps, Maxwell was finally learning to step out of its long dark shadow. And James Carter, you ask? He'd found his own happiness with a lovely pediatrician he'd met volunteering, and remained a cherished, steadfast friend to Tessa and a doting honorary uncle to Evelyn. Some bonds, it turned out, were truly unbreakable. The story of Maxwell and Tessa Harrington didn't end with a neat Hollywood bow. There was no grand romantic reconciliation, no sudden reclaiming of a lost fairy tale. That wasn't real life, and Tessa, above all, had learned to embrace reality, with all its messy imperfections. The scars remained, etched into the landscape of their lives, but they were no longer gaping, bleeding wounds. They were reminders of a battle fought, a storm weathered. The final image, the one that truly defined their new normal, wasn't one of passionate embraces, but of something far more profound, more enduring. It was an image of Tessa, watching Evelyn chase butterflies in a sun-dappled meadow, her face alight with pure, unadulterated joy. Maxwell stood a little way off, leaning against an old oak tree, not intruding but present, his gaze fixed on his daughter, a quiet, almost peaceful expression on his face. A sense of peace, however imperfect, however hard-won, had finally settled over them. Their journey was a testament to resilience, a stark reminder of the destructive power of unchecked suspicion and the insidious nature of past trauma. But it was also a story about the possibility of redemption, not through grand gestures or empty words, but through consistent, humble actions. Trust, once shattered, is a fragile thing, perhaps impossible to fully rebuild to its original form. Yet, the unwavering, unconditional love for a child, as Maxwell and Tessa discovered, can forge unexpected paths to healing, to understanding, and to a new, redefined kind of cooperation. A family, they learned, could be rebuilt, not on the foundations of a broken romance, but on the shared love for the small, laughing girl who now bound them together in ways no courtroom drama, no bitter betrayal could ever truly break. And isn't that a story worth telling? If you've been captivated by this journey of heartbreak, hope, and hard-won redemption, please make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of resilience, and definitely subscribe for more powerful stories that dive deep into the complexities of life and love. We all have our battles. What's yours? Dear friend, life, as the Stoics remind us, rarely offers clarity in the moment. It tests us with chaos, with pain, and then quietly waits to see what we'll do with it. Serafina's story isn't just about betrayal or forgiveness. It's about the raw, unvarnished courage it takes to step back into the fire. Not because you've forgotten how it burned, but because you've decided you're strong enough to walk through it anyway. That kind of strength doesn't come from fairy tales. It comes from choosing each day to face what's broken, to sift through the ashes and to build something new. Not perfect, but real. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're there now. And if so, let this story be your reminder. Healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means refusing to let it define your future. You are not the damage done to you. You are the rebuilding.